I'm connecting to start recording. And so whoever's not talking, can you please mute? I hear some typing in the background. Thank you so much. Welcome. So I typically have slides, and I'm not going to share my slides because I'm just so excited, and I want to see all your faces. And so we have Jutta here. Before that, I just want to say, if this is your first time at Coaching Agile Journeys, just post it in the chat, or raise your hand and wave to us, because we'd love to know who our first timers are, and maybe how you found us. That would be really exciting also. So we have been doing this for 3 years, virtual meetup series, and we have speakers come on, and we've tried different formats of things like Agile Cocktail, where we collaborate around a topic, or so we're just open to trying new formats and new things, and we try to podcast, and we're going to be probably hopping on a podcast bus again in September after a summer break. So we just do this on our own time, and we volunteer, and we just love to give back, and plus we get to learn something at the same time. So the co-hosts, we are Isaac, myself, Jeff Kors, Kristen, Mark Krupp, and Lori Townsend. So co-hosts, you'll see our faces here. Oh, and there's Mark joining. Thanks for waving. So yeah, you can go to our website and find out all about us, coachingagilejourneys.com. Again, we do this on our own time and money. So if you support us, and if our stuff has helped you, help support the continuation of all this, the tools that we use, like the website and Eventbrite and Zoom, of course. And our next, I'm just going to briefly share this because I'm going to share my screen. Just one moment. And there you go. So our next talk is going to be Ryan Lada, Tune Up Your Stand-Ups, and that's September 16th. So if you haven't registered and it sounds interesting to you, please go ahead and register, and then you'll get notified of future events when you do register. So that's it. I am going to turn it over to Jutta, and I'm excited. And Coaching Agile Journeys has partnered with Open Leadership Network to bring in lots of open-minded and open leadership-related stuff. And thanks, Daniel, for joining also. I had read Jutta's book a while back, and it just occurred to me, what a great topic to bring on and chat about what the book means and how she got started with open leadership stuff, and how she integrated all of those things like sociocracy and beyond budgeting and open space into her thinking process. So we're going to have an open chat today, and ask her anything. We're queuing up Slido for the questions. And yeah, I'm going to turn it over to Jutta. Anyone else? Daniel, do you want to say anything before we launch? You're on mute. Yes, you, Daniel Mesick. Yes, sorry.
Yeah. I just want to say hi to everyone, and I'm really, really pleased that we're doing this event today about open space and organizations. We're really getting traction around this idea, and it's an idea whose time has come. So I don't want to take any more of Jutta's time. I'm just so thankful that she's here, and I'm really looking forward to her teaching today on this topic.
Thank you so much, Dan. Yeah, I'm really glad about the invitation, and I'm looking forward to how this all goes. So as Heidi already said, so I didn't bring any slides. I would like to make this as interactive as possible. So more like, probably it's mainly Heidi and the organizers asking the questions, but really everyone is welcome to do so. The topic is really around organizational open space, yet I also know, and Heidi, you forewarned me a little bit, that probably people would be also curious about, well, the integration of beyond budgeting and sociocracy and how this all comes together. Still, I really, would like to keep the topic as much on the focus that was promised, but still, of course, we can deviate, so that's all fine. Well, not sure where to start. I guess I want to start with that, well, I'm from the Agile field, and I kind of assume that might be wrong, that most of you are from the Agile community, also because it's the Agile Journeys here, right? And in the Agile community, at least what I often see in my work, that we often come to a halt when we start working on an Agile way, because the way the organization is organized, well, exactly that, is organized around us, sometimes doesn't really support being Agile. And so this means there is more to well, being agile as a company than just agility. That was kind of the, an aha that John and I had, and I'm pretty sure many others have that as well. So for us, it was obvious that we have to think beyond agile and looking at what else is there and can help to make companies really agile. So really have company-wide agility in place. And agile is still one thing, but for example, it doesn't have really an answer to how do you deal with budgets, and also not so much about, now to the focus of this today, how to leverage the innovative power of every individual in the organization. So it's just more about, well, we have that team and we set the goal for that team and then that team does stuff. But everything around, well, also kind of looking at bylaws or anything that's really not directly producing value is not considered in Agile, really. And sometimes we, whenever I say we, I think I refer to we people in the Agile community, which is probably unfair anyway to generalize so much, but often we in the Agile community kind of think we have an answer and look at, well, what says the manifesto and can we derive something from there? What does it mean for whatever, sales, marketing, hiring, legal, whatever. And yet there isn't really anything there. And on the other hand, there's a lot of stuff out there from people who have worked on that for a long, long time. And also we know this is working. And so it was kind of obvious for us to look at what's working for the different angles of an organization and then combine those and helping this way companies to become agile. So it is, if you will, not really something new that we did there, but the synthesis is the new thing. So combining beyond budgeting, open space, sociocracy, and agile together. And if you take like the first letters, it gives a really great name, we think, which is BOSANOVA. So that's what we came up with. I'm not sure, maybe I stop here and wait for question first. Of course, I can go ongoing, but Heidi?
Yeah, so I have a ton of questions. And so because the topic is around organizational open space, when did you first come across open space and then maybe realize that it could be ported into this organizational arena? So at what point did you realize, I don't know how long you've been working with open space and what your journey has been with open space.
Yeah, right. So, I know there are people in the audience who know open space much better than I do and are doing this for much longer than I do, just looking at Dan here. And so I encountered open space, I think, maybe mid-90s. And it was kind of funny. I shared an apartment with a psychologist, and she says in her community, they are using open space a lot. And actually at the time, so this was before, for example, the Agile conferences and all of that. So right when the time then came that we had XP, the first Agile conference, and then XP and Agile Universe, that was in 2001, then people said, well, we don't want to have these programs and we want to have it more interactive. And then it came to my mind what my roommate then said there. And so I asked her back and also brought in that suggestion to use open space in conferences at that time. Also around that time, it was the first time that I used open space for, which is still one of my favorite, for kind of starting a change, which is probably pretty much related to open space agility. And I'm not like, have of course not used exactly that process because also the book wasn't out, but this is kind of how I started. So kind of as for lifting off, kicking off new product developments and helping with everyone who is involved to clarify what we need to clarify and also what kind of process we are using, but also what do we need to discuss in terms of technology or what architecture do we need. And so just having open space for these different areas. And maybe what's perhaps important, at the time already, I was working more on a larger setting, which maybe makes a difference. I'm not sure if I would have encountered or thought of using open space if I would have worked with like a small team of 5 or so. But once you are working with many people, then it's just so much easier as well to get everyone on board and to ensure that all the voices are heard and that you have all the knowledge of wisdom of everyone who is there if you are using open space for also starting your project development. And there at the time, it was also, for me, probably an aha, because I was new to the topic as well, that once you start doing it this way, then, so using it in a lift-off kickoff situation, people kind of understand that this is the culture we are using. And naturally, and I hope that more people in the audience have seen that, kind of naturally, whatever you have in terms of other stuff coming on later, for example, it might be just regular meetings. So we are speaking 20 years ago, right? And regular meetings, and then people just stood up and said, well, I'm not sure if I can contribute here anymore. And does anyone think whatever we are discussing here is helpful for me? And so I think I can help the project much better if I'm leaving now. And that was all accepted by everyone. So taking the principles also to a lot of other meetings and just kind of, using it as an, I don't know, maybe as a mindset. It's a big word, I'm not sure, but maybe it's the right word.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing. So there are a few questions queued up, and maybe the next one that's appropriate is, open space in organizations is radical for a lot of old school leaders. How do you navigate conversations with the naysayers?
So it is radical, but it's also not. At least if you set up just like an event, and so this is now not organizational open space, and we come there, I promise. But if we are using open space in a company just for just in quotes, for facilitating a meeting, no matter what it is, so kind of starting a change or maybe having an unconference in your organization or starting a new product development or anything like that, from my experience, what you need if people don't know really what it is and they're very uncertain about it, what you need to do is to come up with a kind of an agenda. And the agenda is more or less saying, well, we meet at that time and then we collect what we need to discuss, and then we maybe using the terminologies people are used to, like, and then we prioritize this and then we work on the topics that are the most important. So it is still an agenda, but not an agenda in the way people are used to it, where it says up front, well, first do this and then we do that and later on we discuss this. So it still shows that it's open, but it also shows people who are maybe more uncertain that there is a plan somehow, like saying, okay, and then we work on these different topics for that many hours and then we summarize and wrap it up and decide what we do or so. So I think making clear that although it has the name of open and it is known as unconference or something, that there is a structure. And as soon as people know there's a structure, at least into my experience, then they feel safer and it doesn't feel so risky anymore. So again, it was 20 years ago where, well, that was the only question people had, like, okay, how do you run that? And then we said, well, this way, that way. And so I think my first one was even a 2-day thing. So a really big commitment, right? For, I think we had like 50 people there, which is huge. And it's not knowing what will happen, but just for the managers to know that there is a structure, just gave them enough confidence that this can be done.
Great. I have a follow-on question that's, as you were talking, it came to me. if there is, of your experiences that you've had, does any one story, either a success or failure, really stand out for you as like some moment that was really key in your understanding, or perhaps you learned a lot from it?
That's a tough question. I'm prepared. At the moment, I don't really know. Well, the thing might be to ensure that people really participate. Most often, this is not an issue, but sometimes this can be an issue. That there are people who think up front already, well, this opens something, or maybe they say already, well, that's some of the Agile stuff and we don't like it, or whatever, or this change coming up, I don't like that. And then ensuring that still their voices get heard, and that open space actually provides that possibility for them to get involved on, and also, well, not sure if this is the right way to say that, but change in the direction they think it should go, right? And not really only having to accept everything that somebody else comes up with, which is often the main reason why people don't want to be involved in something. But if they then understand, okay, I can actually have an influence on that change and make a difference there, then it's much easier. So this is, I know it's not maybe concrete enough. However, I have seen exactly this behavior, that then people at first were sitting aside and not really contributing or anything. But then kind of once they understood that they can make a difference this way, and it's not that they have to do what somebody else is telling them, that this makes the difference.
Great, thank you. There is a question that's got a lot of upvotes now, and it's the question is, I'm establishing an agile environment for a new project for the first time. Previously, they were waterfall projects. How will open space help to establish an agile environment?
Aha. So that's probably more a question to Dan. So because they're open space, so here it sounds to me more again like an open space for starting something and bringing everyone on board and using it really for facilitation. And it's really kind of the way I started with before. If you start a new project and the project can be a change initiative, then start this by running an open space where people can bring up all the topics that are on their minds, and maybe even more important, on their hearts, and perhaps as well in their guts. And then allowing them, inviting them to bring these up so that we can discuss these together and find a solution for all of these things. And so I think it's much easier to start with open space than with maybe some of the other things. However, having said that, what I find also very helpful to start with, which is not exactly in this topic here, is if you want to start an agile transformation, or you have just a team, just like starting with one team, I think what's very, very helpful as well is to start with a retrospective. So which is a bit similar to an open space, in the sense that you ensure all voices get heard, and that you come up with some ideas how we as a team can move forward. And so this is my favorite for like smaller teams. So if it's just like one team, then often I start with a retrospective, and we look at what kind of experiences do we all bring into the room, and what do we know has worked in the past, and we should keep doing that, or should do this now in this new team or new development, and what do we know is not working and we should avoid, and what's risky and where should we watch out for, and all of that. So these are then, at least for me, more the typical questions for such a retrospective. So it's not like a classic retrospective where you look back at the last 2 weeks. It's more looking back at the experiences all the people bring in, and then you decide in that retrospective on the core of your process you want to run. So it's again, I think for both retrospectives and open space, if you use them this way, I think the important thing, now speaking of changing to agile and agile transformation, is not that an agile coach, trainer, something and I'm sorry if I tipped on somebody's toes here now, comes in and says, well, I know how this works, and in a way also signaling, and I know what you have done before all sucks. So you did it all wrong, and I know how to do it right. And that's just, well, it's also not true, because that company exists, right? They have sold some products, and therefore it's just not true, right? And therefore we have to work with the experiences that are there and use them and not ignore them. And that, of course, also provides the buy-in that's needed.
Yeah, there's a few questions queued up, but I saw one that kind of relates to this, and I think you probably answered it. It was, how can you do this while establishing an agile mindset and with minimum disruption? I think you had answered that as being start with retrospectives, and that might be a good place to start, because those are sort of accepted event that happens in agile environment anyway.
Well, in starting with retrospectives, also establish that kind of mindset, right? That we own the process. That's also how it starts. And also we always can make a difference, right? We can look at what's helping, what's not. I see Dan is laughing like crazy. What's wrong here?
Yeah, great.
It's a private joke to Harold. Harold has a little head.
Okay, thank you for sharing that private joke, but very publicly.
Sorry about that. Sorry to send it. It's just my friends are here. I'm talking with them.
So the next question that's got a lot of upvotes is, how do we create a powerful invitation for an open space? This kind of open space you're talking about.
Well, it's always then powerful if people feel what's the focus, or in open space lingo, it would be what's the theme of the open space is important to the individual, which also means we have to maybe already investigate what is it that's important to the individual. That could mean phrasing it in a way so it speaks to the people. And maybe I need to kind of say a bit more about that. Often when we say like people are resistant to change, I think, well, I like what I've learned in chaos and complexity theory. Not that I'm an expert in there, but I just explored the field. And so they say there, this doesn't exist. So there is no resistance to change. But what there is that there are attractors for people. And the thing is to find out what is the attractor for a person that's more attractive than this change. And once you found that out, then you can provide a bridge and making that change also in a way more attractive for the people. So that's what I also mean when saying like investigating what is it that's really attractive for the people. And most often it is, well, if you phrase it around some of the pain points that people have, and maybe they have them for a long time, and make that the theme for starting then the transformation or that change initiative with an open space.
Yeah, I heard your attractor comment, and that makes sense. Do you agree with the statement, again, this is a Heidi follow-up question, that people don't mind change as much as they mind change being done to them? So if you evolve in some way, they will get on board? Okay.
Sure, and I guess that's true for every one of us, right? We have all gone through changes, and some of them we initiated by ourselves and some not. And if we haven't initiated them by ourselves, maybe we had that on our bucket list already, and then we were quite happy that it happened to us. But maybe not. Maybe we never wanted to do so, and therefore we always will find a way, well, as much as possible around that change and not going with it. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I like the idea too of starting with the retrospective, because I think sometimes inertia causes people to continue to feel like doing the same thing is the right thing to do. And the retro is a nice way to sort of get people realizing there are things that we could actually improve. Exactly. So then they're more receptive to that change.
Yeah, very true. Well, and again, the ownership of the process, that's also a biggie there. so that they are right away empowered. And it's not the process of the coach or trainer or whoever, right? It's their process.
Yeah. So the next question is, what was your biggest takeaway from the journey of defining the BOSANOVA system? Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, the biggest takeaway is the struggle we had. So I'm saying we, and I haven't mentioned that before. So we co-wrote the book, John Buck and I, and John is very known in the sociocracy community. And so his expertise is absolutely in that field. And you might want to invite him at one point as well. Right. And well, I had been looking into a synthesis before, and I had some of the elements, so which sounds a bit weird, but still. So Agile was for me a given, and then beyond budgeting, I think, was the first thing that I discovered, but also because the way we deal with budget just has such an influence on how projects and products are run. And also how we can deal with disruptions and all of that, because the money is already in different buckets and so on. Well, and then open space was also something that I kind of had early on, but I was always looking for something that's more looking at structure. And at first I thought like democracy. And then I was so happy when I met John and learned about sociocracy. And so this came in here, but this is not about the question. However, so we had kind of a role when putting these together, so having the synthesis. Yet then the question came to us, okay, if I would read that book, or if I want to do anything with BOSANOVA, at latest now, I would like to get an answer to, now what? So what do I do now? Now that I know this is a great synthesis, this is excellent, but what do I do? And on the other hand, we also knew very clearly that there won't be a recipe. There is just no way for a recipe. And as much as everyone likes that, me included, there are just situations, and in this complex field we are in, there are no recipes. And so we really struggled a lot in overcoming this challenge and finding a way how we still can answer the question, now what? So now what do you do? How can you implement it without providing a recipe? And so this big takeaway was when we came up with this, what we call probes. And a probe is a little bit like an experiment, but it's also more than experiment. So a probe consists of a description of a background, so your context you are in, and then a hypothesis you are coming up with, and then one or several experiments. And the experiments have to be safe to fail, so which means no matter if it validates or invalidates the hypothesis, it's always regarded as a success because it's a learning. And also safe to fail in a way that, also the invitation basis, that no matter if people want to participate in the experiment or not, there will be no punishment for that. So this comes kind of all together. And so this whole thing is what we call a probe. And we have in the book, so the whole part 3 is full with probes that we found what companies are doing when they're implementing BOSANOVA or parts of it or exploring that. However, we really think of them more as an inspiration because we believe people have to come up with their own probes. And so our hope is that by seeing what others have tried and done, that people find, oh, my context is pretty much the same, but different. And so I might change my hypothesis a little bit like that and maybe come up with a different experiment, but kind of keeping that thing for continuous learning. So my biggest takeaway, again, coming to that question, is really that possibility of probing, which is more or less nothing else than establishing continuous learning in a company, really, and not only for a single person.
Thank you. Next question. Maybe we may have touched on some of these, but you tell me. What do you like most about open space, and where have you seen it succeed?
This is hard. What I like most, I like the whole concept, how it fits together. So, like the thing that it's on invitation, that it is, well, again, inviting not only people but topics. So maybe now that I'm saying this way, then it is probably the invitation. It's also the invitation of contributing or not, or contributing here or there. Probably it is that invitation thing. And now I wonder if I just use that possibility to dive a little bit deeper into the organizational open space. And because, and I know that question hasn't asked yet, but it might be in the list. Sometimes people ask, well, what is it, what I would do differently, or what we would do differently with the book if we would rewrite it or something. And there the thing is really to be more explicit what we mean with organizational open space. I think we didn't do a really good job. It's kind of a good job, but it could have been done better. And what we mean with that is using the open space principles more or less as a strategy for an organization. So it's not about having a lot of open spaces going on in an organization, or that almost every meeting is run as an open space event, or and that there are not any other meetings. It's really using the principles and has not really anything to do with facilitation. Well, sometimes it's connected, sometimes not. And I give you an example. So one thing which is pretty well known in the Agile field already, I think, is self-selecting teams. That's based on open space principles. So it is inviting people to choose and self-select the teams they want to work with or what they want to work on. And it's not any kind of managers or any position appointing people to teams and then maybe also wonder why it's not working out also. So it's also here that invitation, and it can be done through a facilitated event, by the way, but it doesn't have to be. So I have done that many times also in distributed settings where we had it on the wiki or conference or somewhere, intranet, where we kind of explored first what kind of different products or domains are we having. We explored what kind of skills do we think are needed, and then people signed up and rearranged themselves over time, had some discussions if it's really a good fit, if we work this way here together, or if some people might want to go somewhere else because maybe that team is too strong or not. But it was completely without any management interactions. It was just people organized themselves this way, which is also, of course, a super relation to Agile, where we say, well, self-organization is very important. However, often we don't start that way. Often we start like, oh, you 5 people are sitting in this room and therefore you must be a team. And then we wonder why everyone is really fed up with a daily stand-up because they have nothing in common and they don't have a common goal or anything. So this is like one example, using open space more, the principles as a strategy. Another thing is, even for coming up with products or features, it's an invitation to everyone to come up and suggest a new product, a new feature, kind of what you do in an open space event when people are invited to make suggestions for the marketplace, come up with their topic ideas. And so this is for the whole organization coming up with ideas for new products, new features. And there are companies who are organized that way. And again, it's not an event, it's ongoing, or in open space language, maybe it is the space is open at all times. So there is not like, okay, now we start and now we end. And just the 2 probably most popular examples are, the one is W.L. Gore, so the outdoor equipper, they run this way, so it's everyone can make any kind of suggestion for a new product or feature to a product at any time. And you know, I'm sure we have invented a lot of, well, we is now not Agile community, is kind of the world, whatever, invented a lot of great ideas, how to come up with great ideas, starting with brainstorming and design thinking sessions and innovation labs, and I don't know, and they might work, but on the other hand, most often they work in the way that somebody decides who will be in that, and also somebody decides when we will have great ideas. And this is kind of a weird thing, right? And that's why using these principles just as a general strategy for an organization is such more helpful, especially right now in this VUCA world, these disruptions going on and all of that. We don't have the time at the moment, and also not the bandwidth to kind of hope that this somebody really decided on the right people and the right time. So, and that's, again, that's the thing what we mean with organizational open space is, again, repeating this the third time also, using the principles as a strategy for the whole organization. And it doesn't mean we need to facilitate open spaces all the time, and still it's fine to have a lot of open spaces facilitated. They might help as well, but for something else, right? So for innovation, I think this is so powerful.
Wow, that's great. I had actually never thought of it used for product development, but yes, it's a like crowdsourced, best ideas float to the top kind of thing. So
and see, Heidi, this is exactly what I mean. I think you have read the book, at least you say so, and I think we just didn't do a good enough job in describing that. So we have to get back into our homework.
Well, yes.
Having more sessions like that. That's good too. Yeah, well, there's also actually maybe this one thing, this often kind of confusion, and people say, well, but why did you include open space in BOSANOVA? And some, of course, think because of the acronym, and otherwise it's not really pronounceable very well, and not liberating structures, which is the new kid on the block. However, liberating structures is really about facilitation, and open space offers more than that, I think, with these principles. So this is kind of the key to it. And sorry, I interrupted you.
No, all good. Yeah, I also read it when it first came out, so it might have been a year or so. Did it come out last August or so, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next question is, what if there isn't enough organizational safety to kick off an open space event? You may have sort of talked about a few strategies. Anything else to say around that?
That's a good point. And actually, we had a lot of discussions on the role of trust. Well, BOSANOVA also comes with some values, and then we also started, for example, is trust a value or not? And then also kind of, is trust a prerequisite for a lot of these things, like for open space? And on the one hand, I tend to say yes. Yet on the other hand, things like open space, and the same way actually sociocracy, they are great means for creating trust. And so, yes, it does help if there is some trust there beforehand. But on the other hand, what I learned once from Tom DeMarco, the great one, trust always goes ahead. So you first have to give trust before something else is happening. And so I think exactly these means like open space, retrospectives, and so on, and again, sociocracy, they help to go ahead with trust, and therefore you only have a possibility to have trust established.
Great, thank you so much. First, give trust.
Oh, I see. I guess quoting that you first have to give trust. Actually, then I have to probably quote Tom DeMarco fully. So his story was, I thought it was funny. So his daughter just had the driver's license. And so he was very proud and said, well, my daughter now, she's grown up and has the driver's license. And then she came on a Saturday afternoon up to him and said like, "Oh, Dad, can you give me the key of your new BMW? I want to go out with my friends tonight." And he had a great way how he told that story. So biting his tongue and well, and then he thought, well, if I'm not going ahead, she can never prove that she's trustworthy, right? If I'm not handing over the keys, how will I ever know that she deserved the trust? So, and that was kind of his story. And well, trust always goes ahead.
Wow, great story also. Next question is, how do we sustain open space once it's created? Have you seen any common anti-patterns?
So I assume this is now meant in terms of organizational open space, or is it because for like facilitated open space, it means, well, very often it really finds its way into everything we are doing. So in all get-togethers with people. So as I explained at the beginning, that what I see a lot when people are used to open space, that they start questioning if they are the right people for that topic, and they also stop waiting till whoever Ben is there and we can start talking on that topic. No, well, if Ben had something more important at that time, maybe that's even better, and so we have to make that decision and keep going, right? So it's more that it almost every meeting turns a little bit at least into an open space. That's what I see a lot. And then the question is, maybe is that not enough and we have to still facilitate real open spaces? Well, it depends probably. Definitely, I agree with like open space agility, that whenever you have a change initiative, it's just a great way to get started with something, right? So it is a good way for kicking off any kind of thing. And for organizational open space, I think it's more part of the organizational values then, or the embedded in this is how we run here, how we do things. So it's not so much that people then start to question it or discuss that. It's just a regular thing.
Yeah. I have a question because it came up in one of our other discussions at some point where people heard the word open space, and at some other point someone had misused that word and it wasn't a true open space. So they already had this preconceived notion about open space not working for them or being a free-for-all or something that just failed for them. Have you come across this?
Oh, I've come across a lot of misunderstandings with that. It starts with that people say, well, I don't like to sit together with so many people. And so they understand open space as like open plan offices. And so there are a lot of different meanings around what people think what open space is. And then also the thing that they just say open space is the same as liberating structure. So also here is some misunderstanding. And yeah, I see that. And yes, it's also true that sometimes open space is meant in the right way, but not implemented in the way that it's meant. So kind of calling something, starting with calling something an unconference, but then, and says like it's an open space, but in the end it's not. And then people think like this is open space, but it's not. So there are a lot of examples like that. Yes, definitely. Okay. I guess the key to it is look again, kind of what at least I do in Agile as well, look again at the principles, values of whatever you are doing. And in this case, it's open space, and then see, is it really what I've experienced? Is this aligned with these values, principles or not? And if it's not, then maybe it wasn't open space. Maybe it was still good, but maybe it wasn't. Well, not everything that's not exactly that way, whatever somebody thought it should be, is necessarily bad, right?
Yeah, yeah. There are a couple questions around budgeting. And so this one says, asking Jutta, what triggers, puzzles, or questions do you find help leaders rethink their budgeting process and its impact on their organization?
Yeah, this is also a hard question. So the first thing is, which I think is really good with Beyond Budgeting, that it has been discovered, I think is the right term, by CFOs. So it's different than many of the other things we are dealing with, starting also with something like design thinking, but also Agile, which is more an invention from consultants. Sorry, but it is like that, right? So here it is really people doing that thing, having found out that whatever has been done before hasn't been working, and they also found out that something else is. So this is already something that I find very powerful when speaking with leaders in organizations. And then the other thing is coming up with these examples that I believe everyone knows or has experienced is also helpful. So starting with a thing, just the general budgeting thing, which we probably all have seen or experienced in some way. So that when budgeting period is starting, then, well, we might ask, or our boss or whoever asks for the money for this product development and comes up with any kind of number on various bases, right? And then gets that money. And then things are changing. Maybe they're changing in a way that we don't need all that money. Well, the money is never returned back. I have never seen that it has been returned back to the big bucket. No, what's happening is, well, also people like myself, well, we are quite happy about that, because then people are starting, maybe we can send all our people to trainings and conferences and here and there, and we just spend the money. And maybe it's good, but sometimes it's also not so much aligned with the overall goal. It's because the overall goal in that case is just to get rid of the money, because if the person doesn't, so the boss in that case from that product development, then the next time that person will ask for money, he won't get it, right? Because everyone would say, like, we know, or we know if Jutta is asking for that money, then she always needs only half of it. So we just decide she gets only half of it, right? And then the other way around is true too, right? If I get the money and then change is coming and we need really more because there's a disruption in the market and we really need to shift what we are doing, well, the money is gone. But there's no way really, well, sometimes people have some buffers, but the buffer doesn't work if it's only one way, really. And,
right.
and then there are these other things. So a friend of mine, she's in sales, and typical for sales is you get your absolute goal saying you have to sell 100 units of the product over the year, and if you do, you get your bonus. Well, and then she does and gets the bonus and is very happy, but what does it mean if the competitor has sold twice as much? Or if the competitor has sold half of it? It has a completely different connotation. So it's absolutely meaningless to come up with these absolute goals, and it triggers this funny behavior. And I know this exactly from my friend, and I won't tell you the name, but she said as well, if it's getting October and I have sold all the things that's in my objectives, I stop selling. I push everything to the next year, which is not good for the organization, but it's good for her bonus, of course, because, well, she reached it already. And if she would sell all that, then she knows exactly the next year her objectives would be so much higher up that there's hardly a way of reaching it, right? And actually the other way around is also true. So if she sees in October there's no way of reaching her objectives, she's also pushing it to the next year, because better she tries to reach it next year than selling it now and not really getting the bonus. So it really the way we deal with budgets and goals and targets and forecasts is really not triggering a behavior that's beneficial for a company. So it doesn't really has to do so much with Agile, if you will. It has to do with really what's good and beneficial for a company. And coming up with, telling these examples to leaders, I've never seen somebody saying, no, this is not true in our case. Everyone knows that. Everyone does that. And then the question is still, are we courageous enough to make things different? That's another huge question. However, I often think if we start with awareness, we are already halfway there.
Yes. As you were saying, this kind of anti-pattern based on artificial goals, it struck me, it was, resonated with me, the work of Dan Pink, who discovered that we have these behaviors when there's some artificial goal set for us.
Right.
Yeah. So there's another budget one related, and basically the person is asking, what can I tell stakeholders who want to see budget burn report for Agile teams? Any guidance there? They're looking for budget burn report.
Budget burn reports. Well, first of all, you could just provide them. That's one thing. You can say, well, this is how much we spent and this is where we are. It's possible and doable. Probably it would be helpful to also then say, well, we do that because you're asking for that, but we also show you something that's maybe way more helpful, which is more showing what value did we deliver and what return did that deliverable give us. And also this is kind of what, if you look at beyond budgeting, one way of what they're saying is if you are really beyond a budget, then you could do something like, the more you deliver, the more money you are getting, or you compare it to a competitor and say, well, as long as you're always like in a specific range compared to your competitor, and then your budget is adjusting as well, kind of like that. So there are also different ways of how to deal with it. Yet again, so it is probably first, which is also true what I've seen many years ago with Agile, people were just expecting these and those kinds of status reports, and you can still provide them, yet also offer something which really provides a value, whereas a budget burn down doesn't really provide any value, really.
That's great. You're still doing what they're asking, but providing something additional to give them something else to think about. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. Really great question. So we have about 7 minutes left and time for just a one or two more questions, perhaps, depending on how long. What's the synergy between sociocracy, OST, and beyond budgeting? A high level summary of the synergy.
Well, on the high level, it's, I would say, the values. And then I would put the A with it, so agility. And the values that we found are the ones driving company-wide agility. On the one hand, self-organization, then transparency, then constant customer focus, and continuous learning. And all four of them are really also at the core of these four streams, and which was also a way of how we maybe validated if those four streams are really the ones we are looking for, that they are, on the one hand, provide different perspectives on a company, on an organization, so not really providing the same perspective, but also that they are aligned. Because if they would do something completely different or contrary, then it wouldn't be helpful either. So the synthesis is really, at least for me, those four values. And then looking at what are those streams at best in a synthesis offer to those values. And well, probably from the Agile field, it's perhaps easier for most of you to understand. But if you look at transparency, actually there we had most often the discussions in the Agile field, funny enough. And we derived that from working software over comprehensive documentation. And we derived that because we think that we have that value, not because documentation is not important. I guess we all agree that this is not true. However, that documentation doesn't really tell us the truth. Whereas working software tells the truth, makes transparent where are we really? What value have we created? How does this help or make a difference for the customer? Whereas documents, they might help there, right? But they don't help measuring that. They don't bring that transparency. So this is just like one example as like how in this case, Agile is adding to this value. And well, for sociocracy, transparency is probably more the thing that we discuss the things all in the full round, that we make the decisions jointly and shared, and not in an autocratic way, and also not, as we are often used to in the Agile way, in a democratic way or majority vote way, but based on consent, where we ask if there is anyone who cannot tolerate and live with that decision. So it's not if everyone is happy with it and loves it. It's more like, is it in my range of tolerance? So however, but bringing all these perspectives into the decision-making is one way in sociocracy to provide that transparency. So again, the answer is the values is the synthesis, really.
Thank you. That's a great answer. I have time for one more quick question, because we just have a few minutes left, and then I want to turn it over to Daniel real quick before we close. The question is, what's the relationship between organizational design and open space? Are there org designs that fit better with open space?
Well, I can't really tell. So for me, from my perspective, we need to think differently about organizational design, as we often do. Not saying that in organizational design nobody thinks that way. That's not what I want to say. Yet often the way we look at organizational design, meaning the structure of the company, it is more from the position of the board of directors, stakeholders, shareholders, actually more than stakeholders, shareholders, and not so much, for example, from the customer side, not so much from what we call art and spirit, which is more like vision, ethical values, what's really our purpose as the organization, what's driving us, and also not so much from like everything which is more support and regulation. And so what we believe from an organizational design perspective, we have to bring these four different perspectives, I almost want to say into balance, but I'm not sure if I like balance here, because what I like actually more is that it shifts between those different perspectives. So sometimes we look at it more from, do we make revenue with this? And sometimes we look more into like the ethical aspect and sustaining aspect, because that's more important. And sometimes it's the customer that's more important. But we have to look at all those four perspectives at the whole time. And so this is kind of how I look more into that. And again, not saying that organizational design is not doing anything for that, but yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you. What a great conversation. I believe Mark has done live tweeting. I haven't looked at that yet, so check out the tweets, and this recording will be posted, of course. And I'm going to turn it over to Daniel for a quick moment before we close out, because we're doing this in collaboration with Open Leadership Network. So Daniel Mezick. Thank
you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm putting into the chat a link. The Marai, Kile, who's also here, and myself are offering a course on open space this month. It starts on the 27th. It's 2.5 hours a day. And I think it was Astrid who said a real open space has a burning issue that a lot of people care about. I think that Astrid put that in the chat. And I think some of the others, Ellen and some of the others, also put in good guidance about what is and is not open space. If you want to learn how to transform your transformation using open space, then come to our class. It's limited to 10 people. It's not expensive, and you'll get everything you need, including a set of checklists that will lead you through the process after the class. Some of you here, have been through the course and know how it goes. If you have any questions at all, you can reach us through Coaching Agile Journeys or on social media, and just ask us any questions you like. It's in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, and we hope to see you there.
Great. Thank you so much. And Jutta, if you have any events coming up that you want to share, please feel free to just, oh, you're on mute.
I'm muted. You find it all on our website, and I think I put it up here again in the chat. So there we have all the events that are coming up. I think the next ones are in Europe and not in the US, but there are people from Europe here as well.
Right.
So
I just put
here is yeah, right, Heidi, you put it up on here as well. And there's also stuff out there like recordings and blog articles, and there's a lot of stuff to explore.
Yes, I saw that on your website. Thank you so much. We're so grateful for this time with you, Jutta, and have a great rest of the day. Everyone, thanks for participating.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yes,
Bye.
you're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.